Mr. Mwanza, just take us through a little bit what your association is all about. What are you mandated to do? What is your role, really, for those that do not follow your activities?
So we are the Bankers Association of Zambia, or BAZ, and we are a business and the industry association which represents commercial banks operating in Zambia. So if I may add, it's the commercial banks which are registered and licensed by the central bank, and they operate within the country we call Zambia. So we are that industry association whose interest is to basically protect the interests of our members, but also protect the interests of the varied customers that the bank serves. We focus on the issues that affect the economy, because we know that what affects the economy affects the banking sector. You know, the engine of the economy is the banking sector. The transaction or the action of the economy are recorded in the banking sector. So we are there as an industry association that we are championing the interests and the causes of the commercial banking sector in Zambia. The current number of banks are 17, going to 16, because as you know, there's a process of a merger of 2 banks, which is yet to be finalized, and once that is finalized, we'll be talking about having 16 registered and licensed commercial banks in Zambia.
Interesting. Let's hear from Mr. Mwamba from PMRC. What is a PMRC?
Well, the Policy Monitoring and Research Center is a public policy research institution whose mandate is to be able to conduct evidence-based policy research, to be able to support government in terms of policies and procedures that are critical to national development. And in doing that, we do a number of things. We do outreach in terms of making sure that on a number of economic issues, on a number of policies that are critical to national development, we are able to disseminate it to the relevant stakeholders. We actually work with a number of stakeholders. We work with government directly. We work with civil society organizations. We work with other cooperating partners that have got like-minded interests. And in that line, we have been able to disseminate information that is very critical to be able to inform the public in terms of what is happening in the policy discourse, as well as simplify information that is quite very difficult for the people to be able to understand, by breaking it into pieces that are easy for the people out there to be able to understand what government policy direction is taking them to.
Right, thank you so much. Let's come back to Mr. Mwanza. On the side of BSZ, let's begin from there, because I know that the main issue in this country for about a period of about 10 years, 7 years, has been the debt restructuring, has been to have our debt possibly cancelled, if anything. But what we have achieved at the moment is the debt being restructured after, a very spirited effort which was put up by the President and his team in government, but of course through stakeholders like you, and also PMRC. They've been very consistent in ensuring that they guide government away from the usual blame game that sometimes we see, where politicians, they begin to blame each other. But from your end has been a professional advice, amicable approach to say, look, we do this for the benefit of the people of Zambia. So let's have our debt restructured. And finally, government has, adhered to your advice. How does it feel? Where are we now?
First and foremost, it feels so good. And the congratulations are in order. The nation's leadership, starting from His Excellency the President, for showing the leadership to where we are now. I mean, the team, the Minister of Finance and his team, the Central Bank Governor and his team, Let me just say the entire team that was part of the process of negotiating this date. I think we were all anxious around, are we going to come out of this? They were these were very tough and difficult negotiations. We kept being assured we have reached, and we kept seeing some backtracking. Even just the profile of the debt is so complex, there are so many people in there, and for you to just bring them together under the common framework, not an easy thing. And the process is continuing, because then they have to go into the details, discussing with each individual creditor. But what's most important, we have a framework in place, and it was not an easy process to reach where we are. Quite exciting news for the country, and I think we are resetting the country from an economic perspective, because what was choking us, I think, was that debt impasse. But look, debt in itself is not bad, but bad debt is bad debt.
Which one is bad debt and which one is debt?
So there's good debt.
Right.
The good debt that makes you progress, that is productive. So when you borrow, you should ensure that what you are borrowing, you can have the capacity to pay back. If you can't pay back, then it becomes bad debt. You can explain it at an individual level. You can choose to borrow from a bank at a lower interest rate, right? And pay over a reasonable period of time. Or you can choose to go and borrow from a Shylock, and then you start running and ducking from the lender. So I think the big lesson here is that we must, as a nation, avoid driving ourselves into bad debt, the debt that chokes us, the debt that we can fail to repay. I'm glad that this bad debt is now being restructured, being pushed into the good side of debt, and I hope we can use this window now to, I think, start the hard work around how we can improve productivity, grow the economy, and all those things. I think the hard work has been done around the debt restructuring. At least it was a song all of us were singing, maybe sometimes as an excuse. It's been removed, it's no longer there. I think focus now should be, what should we do to grow the economy? And I'll tell you, the banking sector is in the thick of it, in the middle of it all. They need to provide solutions, and they will provide solutions to the real sector, because I think it's all about growing the economy. It's all about ensuring that the multitudes of people that are unemployed, at least they have some form of opportunity to get into a job. But those jobs are going to be created by the private sector. So it's quite an exciting time in terms of the research we've seen and how we can reshape our economy going forward.
Let's hear from ED as well. PMRC, I know you deal with policy issues, specifically, and research also. Let's look at, first of all, I'll take a little bit back in terms of what really made us to accrue that bad debt, which has been described by Chief Executive Officer here.
Well, I think you could have heard from the Bankers Association of Zambia in terms of decisions about borrowing. So you may be able to recall that Zambia was actually very sound in terms of our economic management, especially if you recall during the time of the MMD, during Mwanawasa's time, we had almost reached at a point where we had negligible debt. Then I think successive governments have been coming, and then of course each government, whenever they come in, there are a number of decisions that have to be made. But strictly to say is that the decisions for which you are borrowing must be very straightforward, and you must be able to understand that whatever you are borrowing, at one point you'll be able to pay back. So, and in trying to do so, you must be responsible in the way you borrow. So at some point, we reached a level where we could not probably borrow responsibly, where we could understand that our debt carrying capacity at a particular point in time is not fit enough to be able to add on extra debt in order for us to move on. But also, the purpose of someone borrowing, we need to make sure that whenever we borrow, our choices in terms of investments must be able to commensurate with our economic dividends. We need to be able to ensure that we borrow for serious reasons and only when it is necessary, so that we focus. Our main focus must be clearly on ensuring that we work hard. In the various sectors of the economy, we give them support to be able to grow. For example, in the agricultural sector, increase the productivity. Give it resources to increase the productivity. In the mining sector, provide clear direction, provide incentives that are going to attract these investors to be able to reinvest their resources to be able to grow. But again, what led us to reach where we are in terms of the debt, which basically started choking us, was our lack of physical mindset in terms of making sure that we look at the economy before we borrow, and of course our investment choices in terms of what we were borrowing. So I think we must now be able to understand that debt affects all of us, and there's nothing like, so if I am going to, even if in a home, if it's in a home, when you decide that you are going to borrow, make sure that this is something that is going to yield economic dividends than something that is going to make you start running away. You start failing to provide for your children. You start failing to meet your repayments in terms of the loan obligations. So this is similar also to a country, and the decisions that we make, we must be able to ensure that they are sound decisions. They are decisions that have been driven by clear evidence that when we borrow, these are the economic dividends that are going to accrue.
How is the future looking like, CEO, going forward now after the restructuring of the debt? Of course, at least for now, for a period of 3 years, we have got that breather. How does the future look like for now?
Well, I think you can be able to see that currently, of course, you would be able to see that the current team at the Ministry of Finance and National Planning, and of course, the leadership from the top, who is the President of the Republic of Zambia, these have been working around the clock to make sure that the challenges that we are talking about now, debt, is actually addressed going forward. And one of the things that spell out where we are going is the issue that we have now restructured part of our debt. We have a $6.3 billion that has been restructured from the bilateral lenders, and we are waiting and the Ministry of Finance and the various stakeholders in terms of those that constitute private creditors. These are bondholders, those loans that we got from commercial banks and so on, because we need a common framework in terms of treatment. They are discussing on how quickly we can also be able to restructure that. But then once we restructure the whole debt, then it simply means that we are going to have a breather. Already we have a breather from the bilateral lenders or creditors, that in the next 3 years, we will have a breather. We will not be able to pay anything. And so that simply tells us that during this 3 years period, we need as a country to make serious sound economic decisions in terms of where we are going to invest these resources. And of course, we must also take cognizance of the fact that even if it means borrowing for development, again, it will take us to look at serious investment options that we know are going to be critical in driving our economic agenda. So it is important that all these issues lay now the foundation to the future. Again, you can actually just see that the debt restructuring was one issue that was hampering this country going forward in terms of having our IMF program to be steadfast in terms of running. But now you can see that after the debt restructuring, Zambia is now due to receive the 188 million US dollars in terms of the IMF package, part of the 1.3 billion US dollars program which we are on. And this has not been easy because at every point in time, there is an evaluation that is done, and after the evaluation that was recently done, it was found that as a country, we had met all the benchmarks that we had set in our homegrown program under the IMF, and so we are now due to receive that tranche, and that money is going to be invested in the various sectors of the economy. But again, you can also see that a number of cooperating partners have come on board. We do have the European Union, we have USAID through the Millennium Challenge. They have come on board to support a lot of government interventions. For example, funding towards the farming blocks, funding towards the social sectors, and so on and so forth. So this already, what has been done has spelled where we are going in terms of how the outlook looks. So the outlook is bright. What is important is let's all work together as a nation to be able to support the noble cause of ensuring that we lead this country in a manner that the future will actually see that there were people that managed this economy well, and here we are.
Work together indeed. Let's hear from Mr. Mwanza. He make mention that at least for a period of 3 years, we will not pay anything. But of course, I'm aware, and you're also aware that the part of the Eurobond, money that of course is supposed to be given back, will be due next year, 2024 as well. You know, how free are we? You know.
So I think the most important thing is the Eurobond holders are talking to government. They've signed the non-disclosure agreement, and I think the process of restructuring the Eurobond is within the G20 framework. Obviously, we will wait to hear more in terms of the details. So there was the 750 million, which was due. The next 1.2 is actually due next year. So the whole essence of this restructuring is that we are expecting that there will be concession given to what was due at past and what is supposed to be coming through. So it's about, we want to hear more now in terms of how far can they provide the concessions. You know, there is the issue of the arrears that have built up from 2020 when we stopped paying. How are they going to be treated? So all those things, I think, are what is being discussed in detail around how we can provide further relief with the private debt holders, the commercial lenders. What's more important is that they're discussing, and the process of discussion has started. And there's a reference point, and the reference point is the recent agreement. It may not be like on like, but at least we are hoping that even the bondholders are aligned towards the G20 framework, and they will be giving us a bit more details around that concession. So the fear around what is due or what is coming due, I think has already been treated with the agreement. What is now remaining is for us to get to more details. What are we going to save? What are we going to pay? in the next 3 years or beyond, because I think on the other side we know that there's a moratorium for 3 years. I think 0.5% is due on the principal, which is just about $75 million US. So we want to see from this 3 billion, how far we're going to stretch it, how far may the concessions come. And I think what's important, the fear that it is due and it will be demanded tomorrow has been dealt with within the agreement that we saw on the 20th of June.
You've mentioned about the non-disclosure debt agreement. What does it mean? And why should we go that route?
No,
in a country where we believe in transparency, accountability, and then we go and entertain such a law.
So a non-disclosure agreement is a pretty standard contract out of mutual respect for each other, that what we are discussing in this room should not go out.
Out to who?
To anyone else outside that room. So
to the members, the people that we represent, they should not know, right?
No. What
does it mean?
We, the people, have entrusted the people to go and talk to those people.
Right.
And we've given them the mandate. So that mandate, they're saying, okay, we want to talk in honesty, in earnestly, and we want to exchange information in a very free and fair manner.
All right.
And we want to discuss without a reference point to what we discuss. That's the whole essence of the non-disclosure agreement, meaning the other party is allowed to say what they want to say. And then the other party also is allowed to say what to say, knowing that whatever is being said will
not be used against the other.
Anyone. That's the whole essence of the non-disclosure agreement. Now, that's a positive step, which means the bondholders are going to advance their thinking. The government is going to advance their thinking. They will ask for information, they will exchange information, they will exchange notes, and at the end of the day, they will come and say, I think we are aligned. We feel in the interest of transparency, we want fair treatment of the debt holders, which is, I think, the whole basis of the G20 common framework is about fairness and transparent around what concessions you give. So the fact that the people that we entrust, we've entrusted to talk to those people that we all are talking to each other, for me, that's a positive step. I mean, that's what happened. It was protracted discussions, I think, which went to almost 2 years or plus. But those discussions kept moving. If they do decide to say we have something to issue, they will obviously issue a public statement. And what will come out to be as agreed by themselves. I think the process of where we are now with the data agreement, we were getting periodic information, right? And then a process was being discussed, and here we are. So I think that's the whole sense of the non-disclosure agreement. It's nothing out of line within a business arrangement in terms of what you do. You want to protect your information, and the other party also wants to protect its information. So a non-disclosure agreement is in the interest of us as Zambians and our representative that we've entrusted to talk to, the bondholders. And the bondholders also, they have their own constituencies. It's not one person. There are various people who have invested. So they are also being protected in the sense that they can go out and hear their views, and they have a constituent to protect as well.
PMRC, your take, I bring this question because as of yesterday, somebody actually expressed concern over the non-disclosure agreement, in debt. And then it was like, I think this could be something that needs to be looked at. Let me hear from the researchers like you. What is your position?
Well, you get to know or to understand that this is very common nearly whenever you are striking important deals that deal with other externalities. The idea is like Mr. Manza has mentioned that when you talk of, for instance, the bondholders, that's people's money. And it could be money for the retirees, for this retiree who has invested in there, who is in the UK, who is in the US, who is in Zambia, who is in South Africa, and so on and so forth. So there is certain, there's particularly certain information that if they get it, do you think they will take it lightly that their money is safe? So it is important that there's mutual respect, because you have the Zambian government, like he has rightly put it, is represented by the Minister of Finance and the team, and the ST and the team and the technical team. Now, the bondholders also, it's a branch managing these funds on behalf of different types of people who have invested in that portfolio. So even us, we have trust that when the minister goes to negotiate, he is negotiating our issues in the best interest of our country. And it is important that it's not everything that must be digested by every citizen, because we need to build confidence between those two parties, the negotiating teams. So imagine if you were the one who had invested in a particular pension house, and you know that that money was later invested in a bond somewhere, and was actually loaned to another country, and this country is totally unable to pay. I mean, the owners of that institution are going to suffer losses for future subscriptions. So there are all those things. You need to protect the mutual interests between these two parties.
Quickly, let's look at, of course, you did mention ED earlier on, which I would also want to get a comment from the Chief Executive Officer here, Mr. Mwanza. As regards to the $188 million that is likely to come to Zambia after we clinch the deal on the debt restructuring, is this money really significant enough to, set the economic trajectory of this country from BSZ?
So I know we are focusing on the restructuring. Let's also focus on the doors that have been opened, the new revenue envelope that will now flow into government.
As a result of the debt restructuring?
Correct.
Okay. Good.
So you point it right. The 189 million was on hold, right? Awaiting the treatment of debt.
Yeah.
Now, immediately we got that good news. What happened? The IMF Executive Board sat and did what? Approved the disbursement of the 189 million. Did we end there? No. We have had the Africa Development Bank President visiting the country this week. What did this do? He brought in 150 million US dollars. Why? Because they are with us. They want to support us to be part of it. These are concession funds, by the way. Then you have the pipelines from the World Bank going into the farm blocks and the other things. I think the European Union, just a week before the debt treatment, they gave us almost 100 million US dollars. So the donor funding process is now being unblocked. There are other initiatives like the Millennium Challenge account. I think it's coming in to support the agricultural sector. So the donors were sitting on the fence waiting to see where we are going to go with our debt situation. Right. So that has unlocked that opportunity for government to have fresh funds that are less priced than the Euro bonds or the commercial debt. So we are in a good space where at least that support that was being held back is now coming through. And then not just that support, there is also an aspect of the sovereign risks of the country which have been lifted. I think once we have a final debt process in the public, we are lifting that sovereign risk. So the rating agencies obviously will be coming closer to re-rate us. And obviously we expect that it to be a positive outturn and outlook. What do those ratings do? They help to reprofile the sovereign risk of a country, and by likewise it helps to unblock the FDI that was sitting on the fence, because we were seen in the matrix as a risky environment. Our sovereign risk profile was very high. So if someone wanted to bring in money into the mining sector, they were like, oh, wait a minute, there could be problems there. So we expect a lot of flows into the economy, part of it direct into budget support, but even to other externalities, new private investment being actualized through FDIs. And all those are things that are going to help to propel the growth trajectory, because then if we have more FDI coming in, it means more productivity, right? More capital coming into the country. And I think the end result is that when you have that more capital, we expect to see businesses growing, the upstream and downstream linkages in terms of the businesses cycle. Because if I'm FDI and I'm a big corporate, I'm coming into the market, I'll bring in a few numbers in terms of the employment. I also bring in the supply chain aspect. So there will be an SME down the chain who will benefit, the logistics and all those things. So I think, yes, we are focusing on the debt restructuring, but let's also focus on the window that has opened, and already we are seeing some of the dividends coming through.
Interesting. Let's hear from PMRC. Mr. Mwanza brings out something very critical, very unique, looking at the doors that have also come about as a result of the debt restructuring. And of course, I want to bring to your attention, Mr. Mwanza, of course, Mr. Mwamba. One of the issues which was talked about is that also the prolonged or the seemingly stalled project, the Luvito, Zambia, Congo, Angola as well, which has prolonged for over the years. This project is likely to be completed, and which will open doors for economic development among the neighboring countries as well. Is this something that we can celebrate?
Well, this is something that that is quite important. You may understand that road connectivity in every country or in every nation plays a critical role in the supply value chain. And you see, it simply means that the works, once those works are completed, who have easy access to markets surrounding these areas, who have a clear connect in terms of market to Angola. It has been very difficult to reach to Angola. Then we are also going to have, these are countries that have got better GDPs, and we are at a center where we can be able to supply these countries with a number of finished products. So certainly that project is quite important for Zambia, because it opens new doors for various aspects, especially when you talk about the area of agriculture, issues to do with import and exports of both agricultural products as well as petroleum products. If we are to say let's import finished products from Angola, that's another shortcut in comparison to other areas where we have been able to use in terms of importation. But of course, it also enables us to be able to ensure that we can reconnect our routes as well, okay, in terms of issues to do with the importation of, issues to do with the movements of goods and services, like there are a number of minerals that may not use, there are a number of exports in terms of goods and services that may prefer to use that route via maybe Dar es Salaam or via, for example, Congo. Congo has always been using Zambia, but an improved road network or an improved transport network will basically increase more volumes in terms of trade volumes between the countries along this trade corridor.
All right, let me come back to the Bankers Association of Zambia. Some experts have argued, more especially those from the economic, faculties, have said you can't develop a country like Zambia in the absence of, local banks. This is one of the problems that we have not only in Zambia but in so many countries in Africa, where we don't own banks. Most of the banks that we have are foreign owned.
Well, it's an interesting argument.
That's fine.
No. I think we are a free market economy.
Yeah.
And whether you are local or foreign, you are open to do banking business.
Right.
Bring the capital. I think what we should be discussing more is that why are we as Zambians not creating opportunities of synergies to start these institutions as opposed to complaining that there are no local banks? What are we doing to support our own local banks?
I like that challenge. Huh?
Right, yeah, because it's an open market.
Yeah.
We should do better in terms of us ourselves.
Being realistic.
Being realistic, because we can't just keep crying that we don't have local banks and you're a local person. Why not say I'm open to do business? I have my 104 million kwacha. I'm bored enough. I'm starting my business. So you put. I mean, you are not allowed to 100% own a bank. Those are the laws.
Maybe it's not easy to set up a bank, and let's hear from you, because I mean you belong there.
Look, it's not easy for one good reason, because we need to protect people's money. That's why the requirements for capital are a bit stringent, but they are favorable to a Zambian. I'll tell you, a foreign-owned bank requires 520 million kwacha to start a bank in Zambia. A local bank only requires 104 million kwacha. It's a factor of 5, right? So the regulator has been kind enough to say we want to have more Zambians who want to do banking, to set up banking. So even just the regulatory profile is skewed towards ensuring that those Zambians that have money, if they so wish to do banking, and they have 105 million Zambian kwacha, they can go to the central bank. The central bank will do the due diligence and everything.
It's quite affordable, meaning you can do it, right?
Well, I wouldn't say it's quite affordable. 105 million is not a small amount of money.
I mean, but if you do it in a team.
But if you team up and you believe in our market, and we've had those examples before. I mean, there are Zambians that started Zambian-owned bank, like Commerce Bank, the defunct Commerce Bank, the defunct African Bank. There are a lot of those examples.
Defunct.
I think, well, there were quite a number of bored Zambians in the years past that came up and started banks, but then maybe governance issues and everything else, they are no longer there. So I think as opposed to crying that why don't we have local banks, we have local banks, and one of the local banks is the most thriving, I must say. But I think what we must be looking at is the opportunities there for us, those of us or those who are out there who have money, to venture into banking. The doors are open, and instead of crying day and night that we will not develop because we don't have, who is going to be that local bank owner if not the people that are talking about having local banks? Let's
look at the budget as well, as we talk about debt restructuring. The budget that we have, of course, is being also financed, supported by, the, should I say, for lack of better words, foreign institutions. Are we safe? Are we going to graduate or to mature at a point where we're able to sustain our own budget without really having the support from elsewhere? I don't know who's going to start first.
Well, I think we are making efforts towards improving our local revenue envelope. Right. I think the targets are moving from 18 to 22%, which is basically about a good standard. Right. But governments all over, really, they don't always depend on the tax envelope. The tax envelope is always limited. That's why there's that other window where you can borrow from people, from institutions. Right. I think we should simplify things that always governments across the world, they do borrow to support budget execution. We use fancy terms like treasury bills, government bonds, but to simplify it, it's government getting money from the public to fund the budget. And then there's also a component which now is from the donor community, which obviously has been shrinking with time. the borrowing can be local, it can be offshore, using either private debt, commercial, or concession. Although we wouldn't encourage that we go back to the root of borrowing from the commercial line. I mean, the pain we've gone through in the last few years, we shouldn't be repeating this scenario. So it's part of the framework of funding a budget. I think any budget across the world, that you have your tax envelope on one hand, and then you can't fund it 100% with your tax envelope. Even the most developed economies, actually, they are the biggest borrowers. Actually, they borrow heavily to support their operations. I think what is important is that the debt that we contract must be sustainable. We must be able to ensure that once we borrow, we pay back. And I think if you look at government on the local debt, they've consistently been asking for money, and they've been meeting the maturities as and when they fall due. But that wasn't the case on the foreign stock of debt,
right,
where we basically went out in 2020 and say, we've reached a tipping point, we're not paying anything, not even the interest component, so help us to come out of this. So we had a 3-year journey around how do we restructure, how do we reset our debt position, especially the foreign owned debt.
This has been argued, ED PMRC. Of course, from what the Chief Executive Officer has mentioned here, others will tell you that, look, Zambia is actually endowed with a lot of minerals. So they debate whether we can finance our own budget or not. It should not be there because Zambia is rich. Are we failing to use our brains and realize what we've been given by God?
Wow. Yeah, I think those sayings have been there. I think even the time some of us were not born, that Zambia is rich. It's endowed with a high grade of natural resources, water, minerals, land, and so on.
Weather.
Yes. I think what is very important is to have right and sound policies in place, first of all. Then do your work in these various sectors where we have our natural resources in an organized way, for you to be able to capture those resources. Because if most I mean, we are rich. We do have quite a number of minerals in this country. Mention it. We have copper. We have gold. We have manganese, and so on and so forth. But I think you may be able to understand that, for example, in the mining sector, for example, we only have about 58% of our natural resources component in terms of the land being mapped, and the rest of the area is not yet mapped. And so it requires that sound and bold decisions and a clear policy direction in terms of how you are going to move forward as a country. What sort of policies do you think are going to stimulate productivity in the various sectors? You could be talking about, yes, Zambia is rich, but then the question is, if Zambia is rich and we have enough rainfall and so on, with the current probably set of policies, maybe in the agricultural sector, producing 1.8 metric tons of maize per hectare on average, do you think you are headed somewhere? Compared to the potential yield of, for example, in maize, I've given that value for production of maize, compared to the production potential of 11 metric tons per hectare. Okay, so you must now be able to devise policies and programs that are going to stimulate productivity in the various sectors of the economy. If it's in the mining sector, in the current form, are we able to increase the coverage in terms of explored areas, okay? Because currently, I've mentioned that we only have about 58% of the area that has been mapped for geological resources. Now, if that is the area, do you really think that we are going to get enough? Then the other aspect, there's also another aspect of, we have mentioned a number of things, there's also another aspect that basically has to do with the mining policies, the physical policies. Is there enough incentives to be able to attract many? Because Zambia is, we are a liberalized economy. So government cannot undertake all these mining operations, and government may not be able to undertake most of these large-scale agricultural operations or even in the other sectors of the economy. So we depend on you and me. We depend on the private sector to be able to amass capital, invest, and be able to produce. The question is, are we able to provide the right ground, the right environment for these sectors to be able to flourish? I think that is what is important for us to answer that question.
Let's talk about the policies as well. Okay. I know the minister will be coming through this evening, and these questions are very much important together with your submissions. But my question to you, PMRC, you deal with the policies. What economic policies do we need to have our economy have the muscle to stand on its own, to stand the test of time, so that, let's say 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, we should not fall back again to start talking about debt restructuring? What economic policies do we need going forward?
Well, we need sound economic policies that are going to stimulate more investments in the private sector. Policies that are going to stimulate. You heard from my colleague, he was mentioning about, we had a number of foreign direct investments sitting at the edge of the tower, watching what was happening with us. Where is Zambia going in terms of managing its debt? Now that we have a clear direction of where we are going, okay? The idea is that most of these issues, if you remember in the last budget, government did announce a number of incentives to the private sector. And so is the incentives that we are provided to in the mining sector. There were changes with regards to the mining tax regimes and so on and so forth, to make it more competitive. So we require that the policies that we are coming up with responds to the current needs of our investors. You and me, we need to make sure, we need to be in a frame that we are attracted to be able to invest in the various sectors of our economy. For example, in the agricultural sector, one of the things you have heard that currently there is a review now concerning, previously we had the farmer input support program, but now we do have the comprehensive agriculture transformation program, which is being accelerated to become more or less like a legal framework, which will be all-encompassing. It will not just look at supporting maize and few legumes in terms of production, but it will look at a holistic approach of the whole agricultural value chain. So you need policies that are going to stimulate serious value chain within particular industries or particular sectors of the economy.
All right, let me hear from the bankers. I mean, these are the people that always want to protect their resources. But of course, you can't protect our resources. You can't really advocate for the growth of the economy if we don't have well-sound policies in place. What is your recommendation?
So obviously, good and sound policies are key. Issues of governance are key. Financial management practices are key. I think we've walked that road around improving the governance framework, the processes around having good policy, a good policy environment. I think we've walked that process.
Right.
It's not about policies. I think we are ring-fencing our policies, and we have laws in place that define what we need to do, what needs to not be doing. But
are we enforcing these laws we have in place? We may have enough laws, but the enforcement becomes questionable sometimes.
So far, watching from a distance, I would say they're being enforced.
All right.
And even if they're not being enforced, they will be enforced one day.
Right.
That's the essence of having these laws.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they will one day be called to question if they're not being enforced.
Right.
So when it comes to resource management, I think for me, it's not about being resource rich. It's about being efficient in terms of how we are managing those resources. Bringing in the efficiency, you will see dividends. He's just talked about the FISIP program. There's a lot of money that goes into that year in, year out. Are we efficient? Are we productive enough? No. So let's focus on those things that will bring in the efficiencies, improve productivity. And once we start looking at efficiencies and looking at increasing productivity, then one day we should wake up and say, we have improved our efficiencies. We have neither copper or nothing, but we are an economy that is thriving. And you should learn a cue from the economy of Lusaka. You know, Lusaka doesn't have the mines, right?
Yes.
It doesn't have even big industries to say. But if you look at the city, it's always buzzing and active, right? One is because almost everyone stands up and they're doing everything. And let me be basic. I'm talking about a marketeer. They wake up every day in the morning to go to Soweto to buy tomatoes, buy cabbages. Why do they do that? They want to put food on the table.
Right.
They are managing their time efficiently. And they will go and sit at their stand. And they know the time the customers are coming. That's why they wake up early, because they know the people will start buying these tomatoes around this particular point in time. So I think once we improve those efficiencies, particularly in terms of public service efficiencies, we can then start seeing productivity going into the communities. And I think that's why, for me, I'm quite excited with the CDF framework. Because the CDF is saying, here's money to your community. Tell yourselves what you want, discuss, and then execute.
Right.
And once you execute it at a local level. What are you doing? You are empowering someone who is local as a contractor, who is going to give you local jobs. But again, they are delivering value, because instead of having that cracked house for a teacher, now you can have a decent teacher's house. And what are you going to do? You're going to attract the best teachers, because you've given them the environment in which they can live without complaining. And they will have the time now to give out war. I mean, they're satisfied, they are well accommodated, the classroom environment is good, the health environment is good. All those things add to productivity. So I think we need to focus on bringing in the efficiencies, whether it's the efficiencies in issuing mining licenses, efficiencies in managing our endowed resources, whether that is gold, sunglight, whatever you're calling it. If you see there's value, bring in the efficiencies. Ring fence. Let's learn from our neighbors. They bring in those efficiencies. And it's those efficiencies that drive value to the GDP, drive value to the growth of the economy. So if we are all as efficient as we should be, then we should be seeing productivity also increasing. And then everyone will be active in one form or the other at a basic level. We all must participate at a basic level. Yes, there are always going to be arguments around how do I start. The question is, how did the other person start? We must start small and scale up. And I think that's what is important. That's why even when you discuss these debt issues, let's borrow what we can manage. There's no harm in borrowing what we can pay back, and you go back and say, I need some more, other than piling debt on debt without any end in sight.
We need to go, Chief Executive Officer, but of course the Minister will be appearing this evening on KBN television. If you met the Minister, and of course, what advice would you give him? Let's begin with Bankers Association of Zambia. What would be a special message to the Minister?
So there'll be three things I would tell him. The first one, just to congratulate him that they walked us to this load we long anticipated. By the way, him as a person, this is not the first time that he's being involved in this debt restructuring process. I think he was ex-secretary to the Treasury when we had the debt write-off. What I would ask is that we've gone through this painful process. Let them create a framework, processes that avoids us drifting back into where we with what we saw in the last 10 years. I think it's very important how we contract future debt. Let's protect the future, let's protect the economy. The next thing is that let's not over-celebrate because the hard work has started. This is the hard work, and it requires all of us, from the private sector, the banks, the manufacturing, it means everyone, including individuals. We need to put in more now that that debt that was choking all of us is out of the way. And then thirdly, let's unlock the economy from a point of balancing the fiscus, balancing the monetary policy, which they've done well in terms of where we are now. I think as attested by the statements which we get from the IMF. And that's where we are now. We have the debt restructuring, we have the IMF releasing all this money because the government did well on their fiscal side of things. The benchmark that we are set, they were able to achieve them. We just want to encourage the minister that he should not balk under pressure in whichever form. He needs to continue with that process. And it shouldn't be about 3 years or linked to the tenure of 5 years. We must be focusing beyond the 10 years of
leaving a legacy.
Correct. Leaving a legacy that we all must step in, and at the end of the day, whoever must come must say, yes, a foundation was laid, the frameworks were put in place, the controls mechanisms were hardened up and tightened up, and in the process, now we launch pad from where we can push our economy to the next level. As I said, hard work starts now.
PMRC Director, the Executive Director, what is your message to the Minister as he appears this evening?
I think first things first, it's always important that I would personally like to congratulate him. I think he has run the race. This has been very sometimes frustrating journey up to the point where him and the team has managed to reach us to where we are in terms of debt restructuring and some of the things that we are seeing now. And of course, in addition, it's also to congratulate him on him being voted as the best Minister of Finance under the just recently FINA award that were held in the UK. Truth be told, I think him and team, I think they need to continue on the same trajectory, but taking cognizant of the fact that we need, if we are to continue on the safe path to debt management, we really require that we continue strengthening our legal framework. And what that simply means is that now we have a legal framework in place in terms of making sure that whatever we have to borrow, it has to go to Parliament. And so we need to make sure that we follow that route. And then the other aspect also is that it would be important that the aspect of transparency which the Ministry of Finance has actually demonstrated, I think in a while we now have the financial report coming out, and this should be like something that they have set and something that needs to continue going forward, because this is quite important. It brings a lot of transparency, it brings a lot of confidence from cooperating partners, from the citizens, and so it is quite important. And finally, it is important that this should not be a one-off journey. I think now we have a lot of work going forward, and so the minister should know that he has our support, and all of us, including yourself, let's support the minister and the Ministry of Finance in making sure that fiscal prudency and making sure that we avoid this future debt issue. We basically take measures to curtail this.
I wish we can go on, but allow me to thank you so much, Mr. Sidney Mwamba, for having come through, of course, representing PMRC as Executive Director. We appreciate you for sponsoring this program.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And of course, let me appreciate the Bankers Association of Zambia, Chief Executive Officer, that's Mr. Leonard Mwanza. Thank you so much, Mr. Mwanza.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much. All right, this has been Innocent Piri. Of course, do stand by for the main interview coming up at 21 hours right here on KBN TV channel 297 at DSTV and Go TV channel 27. Tops of the Decoder channel 102. Thank you so much. May God bless Zambia. May God bless Mother Africa. Good evening.